put all our regular activity on hold and we started building the digital infrastructure that was needed by the refugees coming into Romania.
Josia est un programme pour sauvegarder le patrimoine en situation d'urgence. Faire partie du Scale-up programme nous a permis de réaliser à quel point nous agissons pour la paix.
Empatia is a project that promotes the use of AI to solve public issues such as health, development, or climate change.
The purpose of the initiative is to create collaboration on environmental issues across the India-Pak.
The Scale-up program is an accelerator of global governance solutions. We aim to help project teams be better equipped to influence and challenge governance and ultimately help them amplify their impact and their reach.
Being recognised for the work we were trying to do to make change globally out of Africa and out of the global south was part of what the Scale Up Award meant for us.
We've had a phenomenal year throughout the SCUP program, and I think the secret to kind of growing and scaling impact is collaboration.
To both project leaders and to experts, we ask them, please join us and get involved with the Scale program.
Welcome everybody. I hope you can all hear me with the microphone. Thank you for all joining us on our session on conflict in Sudan, and it's a real pleasure to have in my company the Chief Executive, the founder of the Ibrahim Foundation, and a long-time friend and ally of mine. Mo, it's really great to be with you here this morning, and it's also just appropriate that the Paris Peace Forum has put Sudan on the spotlight session. You know, you and I have been on a back and forth over many years about Sudan, and I remember in 2019 when we all marked with significant optimism what we then called the People's Revolution, and here we are several years later, and it's a complete reversal, a sense of collapse, a sense that everything that we tried to put in place is broken. We've got two main actors fighting for the end in Sudan, and I don't see any clear path out of the current crisis. Can you help our audience here think about what it looks like? What is the scenario that you see today going forward, Mo?
Thank you, Comfort. And I'm glad that the Paris Forum really organized this session. What's happening in Sudan today is the worst disaster in the world today. The number of people killed in Sudan so far exceeds the total number of people killed in Gaza and Ukraine put together. Yet, nobody's paying attention to Sudan. We have about 13 million people displaced.
Yeah.
About 3 million of them are migrants to rich countries. We have 25 million people who are in danger of famine. Right now, we have diseases start to erupt in Sudan. This is the largest disaster in the world happening today. Open any newspaper, switch to any TV station, nobody talks about Sudan. And this is terrible. It's terrible. And I don't know why the world is silent. The silence of the world is deafening, actually. It's incredible.
Is it that the world is silent, or there's a bandwidth issue, there's a deprioritization issue? Because let me give you a good example. I was in New York during UNGA Week, and there were 3 different sessions on Sudan alone. One was on the humanitarian dimension of things, but 3 conversations alongside with Gaza, Ukraine slightly pushed down. So is it an issue that there's no international attention, or there's no clarity on how to bring a resolution?
What you're talking about is extreme exceptional.
Right.
All these conferences,
right.
all this media, the airwaves, is all focusing on Ukraine and Gaza. Important issues. But what's happening in Sudan is much more serious.
Okay.
And it hasn't got enough space in the world attention.
Right.
And nobody's doing anything about it. What will happen if this continues?
Right.
Sudan is larger than Europe and became totally ungovernable space with huge number of people now displaced. And what we're going to do?
Yeah. I mean,
warlords start to appear everywhere. It's not only 2 big fighting forces. There is a lot of other warlords appearing now in different areas in Sudan. This means that the arc of anarchy is extending now from West Africa, from the Atlantic, all the way to the Red Sea.
Yeah.
How are we going to cope with that?
Yeah.
And people need to understand what happens in Sudan will not stay in Sudan.
Yeah, and we're already seeing the impact into Chad with the heightening conflict in Darfur.
Exactly.
We're seeing militias on the
and
border.
what will happen to all those migrants?
Yeah.
When you have 13 million migrants and then in the increase, when those guys start landing on the shores in Europe, what our European friends are going to do?
Let's imagine a scenario, Mo, that you get what you want in terms of getting the international spotlight on Sudan. I mean, here in Paris, already twice this year, President Macron had the Humanitarian Conference in March, and here we are again having Sudan on the spotlight. What do you think fundamentally needs to happen to try to reverse the current deterioration in Sudan? I mean, let me just paint you a picture. Today, as we're speaking, in all the history, in all the time of conflict in Sudan, the capital, Khartoum, has never been in the danger that it's facing today. 20 years on from Darfur, we've got more militias, more fighting, more civilians at the crossfire, and you already put a spotlight on the famine. As we speak, the rainy season has ended. The Security Council, the African Union, multilateralism is under significant test. What do you want to see different happen this time in Sudan?
We need to stop the fighting.
Right.
And all these talks about Jeddah 1, Jeddah 2, Geneva, Jeddah 3 is not working.
Right.
It's not working. Those guys are fighting for power and wealth. They will not stop.
Right.
It is time now for Security Council to exercise its responsibility to protect.
Right.
It needs to authorize a peace force to protect the people in Sudan. The African countries are willing to put boots in the ground.
Are they? Which ones?
They are willing. Look, if Kenya is willing to send peace force to Haiti, what about next door in Sudan?
Right.
And I spoke with President Ruto. He's happy to send people.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a checkered history of peacekeeping. Sorry, I apologize. There's been a checkered history of peacekeeping, peace operations in Sudan. And you'll remember that it was also General Burhan, you know, with one stroke of a pen, asked the latest UN mission there to leave the country. And since you made reference to the Sahel, you saw the unceremonial dismissal of the UN in Mali, and you're seeing also that trend line in the DRC. So how can you then propose for a UN operation or an African-led operation with the blessing, I assume, of the Security Council for Sudan? I mean, peacekeeping is in a precarious
situation is different.
Right.
The peacekeeping before went for Darfur to protect people in Darfur after the massacres in Darfur.
Right.
They needed the permission of the Sudanese government.
Right.
Today, we don't have a Sudanese government. The African Union don't recognize what the people in Port Sudan declaring, you know, they don't recognize Burhan.
Right.
Sudan is suspended from the AU. They
and yet still treats it as a sovereign power. Let's just be clear on that.
Not by the African Union.
Right.
People need to protect it.
Right.
When you protect people, you supersede any sovereignty. What we need is, because how are we going to protect those people?
Right.
Are we going to be held back by red tape?
Yeah.
I need to get a blessing from this guy or that guy. I don't need blessing from anybody.
Mo, let me be provocative to you as well. And there are people here. I mean, I'm seeing here the EU envoy, Dr. Annette Faber. The African Union has been given a very clear mandate itself on trying to work out a political outcome for Sudan.
Yes.
It has the mandate to corral various political actors. If it can't play that role, which is core and central to moving the dial in Sudan, why do you think that it can then mount a peace operation force for Sudan? It has been given the role of guarantor since 2019. What do you think would be different this time with the African Union?
Sorry, the role given or the African Union had.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be given.
Right.
It is
a role.
It's
given it by itself. By its peace
it has the power
Council.
to do it. Has to be. They were trying all the peace roads. Let us try to Jeddah. Let's try to talk to those guys. It doesn't work.
Right.
Now, the African Union is willing and able to put together a peace force to go and protect people.
Right.
What we need now is a Security Council to act. I don't understand. Let me finish.
Okay.
I don't understand. A Security Council will have 3 African countries right now. Mozambique, Algeria, and
Sierra
Leone. Why those guys sitting in their hands?
This is
what they are doing? They need to put a resolution immediately.
Yeah, but this is precisely why I asked you about the role of, I mean, you're talking about the Union. I'm going to break it down to the member states. The member states have had several chances, Mo. The same member states in 2019, you rightly said, suspended. One of the member states tried to undermine that suspension. The same member states together declared a few months ago that they wanted to bring the C5 together. Museveni was supposed to lead this. One of the member states tried to disrupt this process. So the African leaders themselves are undermining the essence of the African Union. So I agree with you, but can we get... you talked about the A3. You know, there's a lot of energy, as you rightly noted, being spent on Ukraine and Israel-Palestine in the Council. Can we get the A3 themselves to push for a more robust conversation at the Security Council, but at the same time insist on that at the AU's own Peace and Security Council to mobilize the kind of international African-led force that you're talking about? Can you see that happening?
Yes, it can happen. It can happen. The problem at the moment, what those guys see are two parallel paths. The other one, let's focus on humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid is not working because there's no security. The World Food Program, they say, look, I have 10 trucks waiting at the border, needing permission.
Right.
They took a lot of time to get the permission to wait. Then only 3 trucks reach the refugee camp. Why? So many warlords in the way. Each one take a truck and take. Now they cannot find drivers. It's so dangerous. So you cannot deliver humanitarian aid when the war is going on. What we need is to stop the war. And that is a prerequisite. And that's why we need a strong resolution of protection. Then everybody walk in line. As long as continues. But listen, there's so many countries now poking their fingers in Sudan. And in absence of an international decision there, we're going to see that increase. All the regional powers now interfering.
Do you imagine, let's imagine a scenario where the idea of a sort of a peace operation force is given green light by the African Union, it's taken to the Security Council. Do you imagine all countries of the Council agreeing to the idea of a force? As you said, there are a number of interested parties who also have friends in the Security Council that could either greenlight this or undermine it as well. And then number 2, Mo, I mean, we haven't talked about...
Let us say it was number 1 first.
Okay, we'll stay with number 1, and I'll come back to number 2.
It was number 1 first. The problem with Security Council, Security Council is polarized. We have the West on one side, we have Russia, and sometimes China on the other side. This resolution needs to come from the African members of Security Council. If it came from them, neither the Russians nor the Americans will veto it.
I wouldn't be too sure
That's
about
the only way to do it.
We've seen, you know, for all their talk about supporting African solutions for African problems, we've also seen, when it suits their own interest, we've seen Russia and China block things that appear to look important to us, but are not necessarily important to them.
Not if it came from African countries. If the African Union
on Burundi,
and the African countries, allow me.
They blocked it on Burundi. I'm just saying we've got to recognize that they're not all friends at the same time.
But if that came from the African Union and the African Union members of the Security Council, I tell you, nobody will block it. China and Russia are courting Africa. They cannot be hostile for a humanitarian decision to stop the killing in Sudan. They cannot afford that.
Do you think that the other side of the aisle, either the Gulf countries, would support this kind of mission?
Yes.
Okay.
I talked to many players, and everybody thinks that's the only way to do it. Why aren't we doing it?
Right. And the 2 other pieces, the 2 other actors in this story, Hemeti and Burhan and their forces, do you think they will allow this kind of humanitarian-focused mission to be able to operate on the ground? I ask this given already the precarious situation that the UN itself is having, but also other aid agencies are having.
If these 2 forces don't object to that, they will be betraying their own people who both of them pretend they're trying to protect.
Mo, I think our time is coming up. Or do we still have a few minutes to ask some more questions? Mo, let me focus on the 2 actors, because in the end these are the elephants in the room. And as you know, a lot of there was this effort to bring the various players to Geneva and to bring Burhan and Hemeti to Geneva as well. And you saw there was a lack of appetite.
The army refused to go, yes. Burhan refused to go.
And the US envoy and others went to Cairo with Blinken to try and encourage him to come to Geneva. This is why I'm pushing you that in the end, why should African peacekeepers enter a space where the likelihood of them being able to fulfill their mission will be compromised on day 1 when neither side would give them the space? And also, why give the space if you have the upper hand in the war at the moment?
No, Sudan. And nobody can defeat the other side, and that is clear. So we need really a third force to come in between those people. We need to try to declare, you know, safe zone areas and protect these zone areas. And then we need to expand that. And we need also to dry the sources of funding and armaments to the two sides. Because there's at least 5 or 6 countries now, all involved, 5 or 6 countries, supplying arms and money, etc. When you have the resolution from the Security Council, that will stop those people doing that.
Would you then call for an arms embargo then?
Sorry?
Would you then call for an arms embargo to accompany
that's part of it.
that resolution?
Yeah. We need to dry the money, sources of money, and we need to dry the sources of arms, which are feeding this stupid war in Sudan. I mean, what is the end of this?
Can I ask you just one more question before we move to the audience? I mean, the other missing link in all of this, Mo, is the center of gravity in terms of political leadership as well. I mean, we've exercised a lot of time thinking about external actors. We spent an awful lot of time talking about the two men at the heart of this conflict as well. But where are the key political leaders who can begin to craft what a vision of Sudan looks like? I mean, where does it sit today? Because that's the other missing link in all of this.
The problem, there are too many of them.
Right.
And the challenge was try to unify all the civilian democratic forces in one front. And that is very important. Sudan has too many political parties and groups, and that doesn't work. They need really to get all together, all the people who are fighting for democracy, for civilian rule, who had enough with soldiers. Sudan for 55 years have been run by soldiers. This is abnormal. This is not normal. It's time really to get the civilians back in power.
Takadum was an attempt to do that.
Yes.
And what is your assessment today of
I think they're moving forward.
Right.
But they also need to open the door for more and to the side, for people just to come together to save the country.
And you imagine a scenario where all Sudanese, and I deliberately say all, and I'm here, maybe I should break it down and be specific and say even the Islamists as well, because we know that some external actors would prefer not to have the Islamists, for example, at the table.
There are Islamicists who believe in democracy. Those are welcome. There are Islamicists who going for violence. Those are out of the question because there's no difference between them and the soldiers. So we have to differentiate between Islamicists. It's fine. This is not about ideology. Anybody is welcome to the table, provided they believe in democracy and civilian rule. That's all, nothing more.
Well, I'm going to stop it here because we're going to move to Q&A, and there are a number of people in the audience that will have lots of questions to ask you, and I already see the hand of the EU envoy. Answers.
Thank you. It's very good to see you, Mo, and Comfort as well. Thank you very much for being so clear. I think we need this discussion. I think we need this clarity also, what is the way forward, because I think we all agree we will come to the 2nd anniversary, to the 3rd, to the 5th. Maybe 2 questions. You spoke about the political landscape. What does it take to get this political landscape to unify behind the two important, should remain there. I don't think we should have one political idea in Sudan, but what does it take? How do we get them there as EU? Of course, we have a lot of consultations, we work with the civilians, but my sense is still that there is too much difference. How can we unify that? How can they unify? And the second question, how do you look at Sudan if we cannot pressure and convince the two parties? Are you looking at it into a new partition? Or is it going to be a failed state? Or is it going to remain one Sudan? Because of course, all three, should be avoided, but what's the most likely in your opinion? But really, thank you for being so clear on the protection of civilians here as well. Thanks.
Mo, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. I think Sudan is already a failed state. There's no state in Sudan. Khartoum is devastated, totally destroyed. No place for civilians to act anywhere in Sudan. That's why we need to act really decisively. trying to argue with the two sides for peace is just waste. Look, was it Einstein who said, you know, you're trying to do the same thing, expecting different result is stupid? I think, please, this is a correct statement. So that doesn't work. We need to really act and act quickly. And as for the civilians, we cannot from outside unite the civilians. It is up for them to come together. There have been various attempts to bring people together, and I think it will succeed. But what we need first is to secure the country, offer peace to the people. Those political actors, many of those leaders, where are they? Some in Kenya, some in Uganda, some in Cairo, some in Abu Dhabi, some in Riyadh. How does it work? We need those guys to come back to Sudan, to connect with their own people and to really start building the civilian state again. But without a strong reaction from the Security Council and the African Union, there is no hope. And please, what happened in Sudan will not stay in Sudan. If this continues, you're going to have a tsunami of migration here in Europe and elsewhere. And then you're going to start to complain, my dear.
Who want to ask you some questions. I will say that the impact already on the region is pretty clear in Chad, but also in South Sudan, where the economy itself is suffering. I've got 4 gentlemen who want to ask you a question. I'll take you first, and I'm going to take them all together because I'm keeping an eye on the time, Mo. So I've got this gentleman here. I've got these 2 gentlemen behind us here, Mo, and I've got one more gentleman just behind me as well. So let me start with you, and then we'll go round the circle. Please, go ahead with your question.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Echo et Monsieur.
Thank you very much to both of you. I'm from Chad, Abdelaziz Ali. I'm a researcher in political science as Chadian. We've seen the consequences of the war in Sudan with the flow of migrants crossing the Chadian border. And my question is very simple. How come this local war in Sudan is still raging, and who's pulling the strings in this war? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll take these 2 gentlemen behind you, Mo, and this other gentleman here, please. And if I ask you to keep your questions very brief, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mo Ibrahim. I am Tamfo Richard. I'm from Cameroon. I've listened to you very keenly, and whatever you are explaining, it seems very simple. But I think the problem of why these wars continue to perdure is because of we, the Africans ourselves, especially the leaders, who, when they are to power, they think only about themselves. They don't have the love for the people, because there are some minute conflict that could be restricted or avoided. But when you have leaders who don't listen to their people, for example, where I come from, we have a president.
What's your question, please?
Yes, my question is, the problem is not about those institutions that he's stating. The problem is about thinking about the African Union.
Right.
We think that, to me, I think that that's something that has to be dissolved. Is there any possibility of dissolving the African Union?
That's a whole nother session, right? But let me take the gentleman next to you as well. Please keep your questions precise and short. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Fabrice Lena. I'm also from Cameroon. I'm a political aspirant from Cameroon. I remember 4 years ago, Mr. Mo asked the President of the Republic of Cameroon a very pertinent question in English, and he was very embarrassed because he could not speak English. But of course, I'm from the minority community of this region. Sudan seems to be going down the same spiral as cultural and identity problems. Do you see Sudan going the same way in Cameroon with another region seeking to separate again from the central government? I mean, the Darfur region where the other general come from and the other regions, making Sudan to deliver 2 other states. Already Southern Sudan is an independent country. Are we looking forward to another sub-independent country again from Sudan? This is where I'm looking at, because it has some similarities with the situation in Cameroon.
Thank you very much. And I'll take the last gentleman here. Thank you very much. No. Is it working? Do you want to...
About this, yes. Thank you, Mo Ibrahim, for being here. Daniel Brown, journalist and also at HEC Paris. two very short questions. Firstly, you said that you have the fortune of being close to major players, that you can exchange with them. How do they respond to what seems to be a win-win proposal that you're making that can only benefit the world and especially your fellow Sudanese? And second question, this is the latest chapter in a long history of wars that began maybe in 1949, maybe the longest in the African continent. You're obviously very personally engaged. There's a passion there. How do you maintain that passion?
Thank you very much. Mo, there's a lot of questions in one provocative one that's calling into the question the African Union. Do you want to use your mic? Do you want to use your mic? Yeah.
There's some statements and some questions. I agree with your statements about the failure of leadership. That's correct. I have nothing to say more about that. Concerning the division of Sudan is already happening, and if we don't act quickly, Sudan will be really fiefdom, with so many different, I wouldn't call it states, because you don't have the requirements of a state. But it just will be a lawless land, absolute anarchy. And that's what we cannot afford. This is an area bigger than Western Europe, and so many people there, and this is a huge problem, and going to infect everybody. And my friend from Chad, yes, I fully appreciate the problem in Chad with the influx of migrants. Egypt even have more migrants than Chad. And that is destabilizing your own countries, of course. But that's the tip of the iceberg, These numbers keep increasing. We need to stop that. Absolutely stop that. And nobody talk about this. When your country receives 1 million refugees, nobody talk about that. If Europe gets a million refugees, the government is toppled. Yeah? You can see the march of the right parties here in Europe on the basis of immigration or whatever. You see what happened in the US election about migration, etc. So this is destabilizing to everybody, and that has to really stop. Yeah. As for your question, I don't remember what was the first question.
I mean, it's really, Mo, the heart of what you've been talking about today, this morning, about mobilizing both African leaders, but also the international community, and you've put the burden on the security.
We have in record. It is in YouTube, elsewhere. In my conversation with Moussa Faki, he stood up and said, "We are willing to send our troops in Sudan to keep the peace." President Ruto said, "I'm willing to send our troops." All those guys said they're willing to send people there. What you need is a resolution, is a legal coverage for that, and that's why we said Security Council, if you are worth the name you have, Security Council, please secure people. Otherwise, you go home. Why you need the United Nations?
That is a precise...
What for if it doesn't act in a situation like this?
That's really a good point in which for us to end the conversation. You are challenging the heart of multilateralism, and the mandate of the Security Council is international peace and security.
Absolutely.
So I think we've heard a very clear message from you, Mo. You thought you were going to ask me a lot of questions, but I ambushed you.
To ask you some questions.
I ambushed you because I thought it was important that people heard very clearly what you're saying, that the two centers of multilateralism need to work together to begin to think of what a civilian protection looks like in Sudan. Mo, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to push you very hard and to get these issues out from you, but also thank you to our audience for the questions that they ask you. Mo, Ibrahim, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.